You good to go? All right, awesome. All right, thank you everybody for joining us. We have a great discussion today. Joining us is Cam Davidson, who is the Assistant Director of Performance Enhancement here at Penn State. He works with women's volleyball and men's ice hockey. Today, he's going to lead us in a discussion about the high performance model that might exist in college athletics and how he has been able to use that model to both guide some of his training with his athletes, and also how he has applied that model to some of the data he collects with his teams, and how he's been able to use that to help him interpret the data and then apply it to real life training and decision making and practice planning and game planning and stuff like that. So without further ado, I'm really excited to hear what Cam has to say. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Cam.
Please tell me you can hear me. Yes, it's either this one or my one that doesn't work. So I'm glad I made the right choice. And fair warning, I am highly caffeinated. I'm like on 8th cup of coffee and I'm jittery. So, hey, we got the Beard Speaks on here. Hey, buddy.
Going on.
Okay, so I want to be really respectful of your guys' time. So I'll just get right into this. And first, I got to say a huge thank you to Nelly and Adam and John and Anna and what you guys do for this whole high performance thing. It's been extremely valuable for moving in the direction of the high performance model. Because I'll be completely honest with you, I've been doing that, with this data for about 5-6 years now. And I absolutely was one of those strength coaches who, sorry for this, but I thought it was frankly bullshit early on. Really, because what we were doing with some other sports was really working, and we were very successful, and we weren't really dealing in the high performance model. So a lot of that with me was, is this going to be worth it? Is it going to be moving forward with all this data collection? What are we going to do with it? And a lot of that for me was just because I was, highly ignorant on the fact of what it could do for me. So really that's where that was coming from. But also really big thank you to the coaches that I work with because of their willingness to actually buy into it and really be open-minded of what we were doing moving forward with our data. Because if they're not into it, it really doesn't matter what we're looking at if it can't affect positive change. And that's kind of my whole point of this, is if you're going to have heart rate monitors or GPS or Whoop or body fat, it doesn't really matter what kind of data you collect if you're not using it. It's got to really be useful to shape positive change in what you're delivering to your athletes. So those main 3 things is really where this is coming from. And I think I need to share my screen here if that's okay, Nelly. Can I do that? Is that okay?
You should be able to. Yeah, I got you as a
There
cover.
it is. There it is. Can everybody see that? Okay, perfect. So there we go. So this first pyramid here is really what we were doing from, when I first started being a strength coach in 2005 until really about 2013. Nelly's been sharing the high performance model on Twitter, and I hope you guys have been checking that out. It's really good information and awesome stuff. But you think back on that and you look like we're just right in the middle being strength and conditioning coach. We're lifting in the weight room, we're running a couple times, and then we might go to a couple practices, so, I may have said a nutrition talk like 1 to 2 times a year. So, looking at what the high performance model is and seeing what you can do globally with that when everyone is involved is a really big deal. And when you kind of look back to this pyramid and say, hey, I was just doing minimal, you kind of see where it goes. And this is obviously what I'm talking about in this high performance model. And, really just copied what Nelly shared. And that foundation, absolutely is health and wellness. And I'm going to try to prove to you through data of how important that really is in terms of having success. That is huge. And if that's not your foundation, you're missing the boat. And obviously going through that the mental, technical, tactical side, and just branching out as a strength coach from the physical to help out with these other things. And this is where my head is at with it. On the right-hand side, that's my job as a strength coach, to make robust and durable athletes, period. That's step one. I want to be strong. I want to be fast and explosive and in shape and fit. But if, nobody gives a shit if I have a volleyball girl squatting 315, but she's, she never is able to touch higher than 10.8, or she's hurt, or I have a hockey guy deadlifting 500 and he can't skate. I hope that resonates with everybody, because being strong is a very good thing. We want to be strong, but if you can't really provide the explosiveness and being robust and durable, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm not going to hang on that too much. Going on that very far left side, that's the mental side, and what we do really comes from the culture of the team in maintaining a positive attitude, always being mentally tough. In my eyes, is doing the right things the right way, regardless of the situation. That's what mental toughness is to me, and just really caring, having positive body language, coming in and holding yourself well, whether you win or lose that weekend. I think we all know it's a little bit easier when you win and pretty tough when you lose, but that's really what we're looking at. And so the new kind of lens that I have through these last 5-6 years and working in the high performance model is the technical and tactical side. And from that strength coach thing, it's, my job is to help coach, and this is going to be highly hockey related, but my job is to help Gads with what he needs to do. I'm not here to essentially change anything what Gads wants to do. My job is to say, okay, how can I fit my program to fit around practice so we can be ready for games and compete? And the technical tactical side comes into play, where if I'm going to practice, okay, the tactical is my knowledge of how each athlete is utilized in game situations. I'll show a couple examples here, but if I know what the goalie's supposed to do, if he blocks a puck and he doesn't control the rebound, and he can't recover and push the other way to get the rebound, how can I help him do that? That's a tactical way that a strength coach can help somebody on the ice. If a forward gets caught on his heels and he's getting blown by, that's, my knowledge is how can he be in a better position in that game situation? And then how technically can I bring that in the weight room so he can perform that task successfully? And I hope that makes sense. And that's really just a small piece. It's a small piece. And this was one of my shortcomings early on, was I thought this tactical side was going to just completely change my whole thing. It doesn't. It just adds that nice little well-rounded piece where you can fit it into your training. And me and Adam were talking about this yesterday, and I'll get into this. As a strength coach, we're going to do, like, most strength coaches have these 10 like meat and potatoes movements that we're going to do. Whether I work with hockey or volleyball or throwers or softball or golf or those sports, I'm going to do my big rocks, right? Well, I might do like a transverse lunge with them, but the difference is my language to the athlete. Back when I was working golf, I'm not going to say, hey, we're going to do a transverse lunge just in case you're going to skate one of these days. Like, you're going to really relate that to them in a way that they make the connection here of how the weight room is going to help them on the ice. And that's really important. And that's really why I utilize this high performance model and just been so successful in what we're trying to do and win championships, because that, number one, is the best key performance indicator for me personally. I take losses personally, although with volleyball and hockey, my record is 0-0. Really, I don't win or lose games, but when we lose, I hate it. But anyway, I'm trying not to waffle on here. Let's move on. So really, the high performance model is really to make decisions easy. It's supposed to make decisions easy. It's not going to complicate your day. It's not going to add all this stuff where you don't know what you're doing. But once you kind of, see the forest for the trees, like, it really does help you make decisions. And the implementation of the technical and tactical side of sports science is to consolidate your stressors. Consolidate the stress on and off the ice, on and off the field, on and off the court. And what I mean by that is, let's just use hockey, for example. Our Monday and Tuesday practices, Monday's a little easier and Tuesday's hard. In the past, my lift on an easy practice would be hard because in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's going to be a hard lift because practice is easy. And then our harder practice, my lift was really easy because I wanted them to be able to skate hard. Well, what that does is it raises the level of stress for that day right here. The stress is exactly the same. And what that does is that is not consolidating your stressors. So if you have the same amount of stress every single day, and then coach comes to me and says, hey, why are we sluggish? I'm sorry, I have no clue. That's the worst answer you could ever give, but that's the truth. I don't know. Did we lift too much? Did we practice too much? I don't know. So when you start changing that's what I did mainly was I changed my lifts to complement practice. So when we have a very hard practice, that's my hardest lift. Our Tuesday is our hardest and longest practice. That's my hard lift. And it's not being irresponsible. It's not blowing them out in the gym so they can't go skate. You know, in volleyball, I lift them in the morning. I'm not blowing them out in the morning so they can't jump to perform in practice. That's just the goal of the strength coach. That's, you know, you got to be smart, but making the high day and the low day will help you pinpoint what the heck is going on if you're not recovered. Because really you can't pull that cell, you know, the mitochondria in two different directions. It's like you want to run a mile in the morning and then go 10, 50-yard sprints in the afternoon. You can't do that. You know, if you're going to run a mile, run a mile. If you're going to do your sprints, do your sprints. So really for me, it helped us just consolidate the stress. High with high, low with low. You recover when you're supposed to recover. And then you can say that day is the day where we're messing up. And that does come into play. And movement. So these movements are better learned on our low days. So this is really strength coach side here, but this is how we implement it. And this is mainly Monday for me. Like I mentioned, the tactical side is our F3 skating, you know, how that athlete skates in a certain situation. So if the opposing team gets the puck and starts to break out of the zone, that F3, he needs to be able to skate backwards, recognize that he's coming, pivot and sprint so he can contest him before the midline. I hope you all follow me there. So if he contests him successfully, it could cause a turnover. We get the puck back, we enter the zone successfully. Now our forwards can fly with speed, our D-men can change, and we got fresh legs for a new shift. And I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later too, but that the whole cycle of being successful tactically, because we technically did something well, is how that really works. And the technical side, as I put it in the weight room, I make sure that our guys have the correct hip mobility, coordination, and balance to do the lift, but also building strength at that lift. And then you guys can see here these two pictures on the right-hand side. On the very right-hand side, it's just a guy that's able to maintain his outside edge. That has a lot to do with position and speed, like going into corners and just entering things with speed. On the left-hand side is a lift that I do to really have them build strength in that position. So that's just a one leg, I call it one leg outside edge strap squat. That's pretty wordy, I know, but the guys know that when they do that exercise, this is what we're working on. So hopefully it translates to on the ice, just something more that's not a deadlift, a chin up, or a squat that they can actually tangibly take and say, this is how it's going to help my skating. And again, that's just all buy-in. So that's the tactical side. And just lastly, to hit this, this is how things line up. So Monday's our skill day on the ice. That's the day I do my ISOs and movement. Again, like the transverse lunge with the third man high. On the right, the top right, that's our Tuesday practice. That's our toughest, longest day. That's my really tough central nervous system lift. We're lifting heavy and we're going explosive. I'm going to really work them hard that day. We test some jumps that day as well because it makes sense. The bottom left is our Wednesday. That's our recovery day. So that's when we do a lot of hip openers and just make sure we're moving well. We don't do much on the ice at all. So I know for a fact we're recovering. And then Thursday practice, you know, that's a 30-minute practice at most. Small area games. It's the highest intensity day of the week, day before a game. And I'm in here doing light cleans, timing sprints, doing med ball throws, doing trap bar jumps. But really the main thing is low volume, and just making sure we're moving well for the game. So really for me, is if we're not recovering well, I know for a fact that it's either Tuesday or Thursday I'm doing too much. That's usually what it comes down to, is just watching my volume. So really that in the high performance model of the technical tactical approach, I know Nelly, you're probably going to get to that. I hope I'm not stealing any thunder there. But really that's what it is. And it's super simple to me. I don't think it needs to be complicated. And that's just how we utilize that high performance thought of what we're doing, and how we're really looking at recovery week to week, to know that our athletes are in the best condition going into the weekend playing Friday, Saturday. So switching gears here, like I said earlier, data collection means jack if you don't know what it's doing and if people are not educated. So hopefully everybody knows this movie. This is, Tank from the Matrix. Who the heck knows what he's looking at? I don't want to be like Tank. I don't want to be the only guy looking at my data knowing what the heck's going on. I think the big takeaway here for me is if anybody is going to do the data collection, just take your time. Just let it come to you. Please be patient because it just doesn't happen quickly. And I'm just going to go through what we did and how we did it over the past 4 or 5 years. And hopefully you guys can get something out of it. But really, we use a system called Forceplate. It's not GPS. It's just internal load. It's just the heart rate load. This is year one. Year one, I didn't know what the heck I was going to be looking at, honestly. And I went with Forceplate because it was a very clean readout. This isn't the full PDF page, but after every practice and every game or lift or conditioning session that we wear, after every session, the athletes and the coaches get emailed this printout. So for me, it was if every athlete and coach is going to be emailed this, they're probably going to be looking at it. So step one, I better learn what the hell I'm looking at. And then step two, let's educate the coaches on what the hell it means. Because I didn't know what it meant before I started looking at it. Let's, just be honest. So the top line there, that's the first line centerman in game. Period 1, period 2, period 3, and actually went into overtime. And you can see that's where the education piece is that's what it looks like when you're in shape. All right. We want to see if anybody out there is scared of your athletes being in the red or seeing themselves in the red, please don't be, because that's a very good thing. You want your athletes to be in the red because it means their heart rate has a high ceiling. They're able to do a high workload, very intense when they're out there doing their job. On the flip side, you want to see that high short peak, but you also want to see a very deep, longer valley. And that just means you're recovering. And that's why this is such a good example, because you see him going up into the red, not very long, but he's coming down all the way down to recovery training, which is what we want. Second period, he's a little bit worse. And that's where an education comes in, because he'll see that. And this is a couple of times where he's come to me and says, why am I not in the green so much? And my communication was, well, look at those first 2 shifts and look how much wider that red line is. Your shift was longer. This is what shift length does to your recovery. And I'm going to bring that back around here in a little bit. But mainly, if they know that this is what it looks like when they're in shape, if they're now in a long red and yellow peak, followed by a very shallow, short valley, now we know how to tell them, listen, you need to either A, have your shift length lower, or B, we need to make sure you're recovered, which brings me to that lower graph, which it's Trimp. Trimp is training impact, or how hard it feels like for the kid. And that's a cumulative Trimp, which means is he recovering? So this line right here is a really good example. He's in a really good spot. He's right in the middle. We don't ever want it to be below that yellow because that's detraining, but we also don't want to see that above the red. Being above the red a couple days in a row, I used to think 5 days was okay. I now think no. I now think 3 days is okay. And if a guy's above that red for 3 days, I'm stepping in and making change. I'm going to ask him questions. Are you sleeping? That's number one. Are you eating well? Number two. If he's eating and sleeping well, but he's still above the red, then I'm going to start cutting lift. If he's eating well, sleeping well, and we cut lift and he's still in the red, now we're going to look to practice. And practice is usually the 4th step because obviously the goal is for them to practice. Like the goal is to not do an hour and a half lift and not be able to skate. Like we need to skate. So really that's kind of the order of what we're doing here. And it's just the education piece for those athletes knowing what they're looking at. And this is a conversation that happens once a month, once every 3 months, twice a year. Doesn't have to happen very often. If nothing's jumping out, it's okay. So you don't have to beat a dead horse. You don't have to really, because if you talk to them too much, they're going to lose interest. So that was year one. That's all we did year one, was learn what the graph looked like and what Trimp was and what that meant. Now, year two, coaches started driving where I was going with this. And that's the best thing to really go to practice and talk to your coaches. That's why I love traveling, because if I'm tired, on a Monday. I know they're really tired because all I did was sit on my ass watching the game. So, but the question from the coach was, hey, Cam, why are we sluggish on Saturday? We're flying on Friday. Why are we sluggish on Saturday? I don't know, coach. It sucks to say I don't know, but I didn't know. And so I started looking at it and we started calculating intensity. What intensity is Trimp over time, Trimp per minute. Okay, so that gives you your intensity of how hard that day is, how hard that circuit is, or the conditioning or practices or games. And really what it does is it lets you compare practices to games. So our longest practice is an hour long. It lets me compare an hour-long practice to a 2.5-hour game. Okay, and so what we came to is you'll see, can you guys see that cursor? I just want to make sure you guys can see. Okay, so you see right here how Friday and Saturday, that's really good. That's what we want to see. This comes from a week that we beat the crap out of that opponent. We swept them and it was really good. So Friday's here, Trimp is high, intensity's high, that's really good. Saturday, Trimp is high, intensity's high, that's really good. Where we run into problems when we're sluggish is Trimp is here, but this intensity drops down here. Why does that happen? So I'll just give you the answer. It happens right here. This is the key, because Wednesday and Thursday, Wednesday's a low day. Thursday is that really fast, intense day. That's never going to change. What's going to change right here? So that was our answer. And it was right here. So Monday, that's our skill day. That's supposed to be easier. If Monday, Trimp starts to come up here and intensity starts to climb up here, but Tuesday stays the same, we are wrong. And it took me a long time to get the balls to go tell Gads that. I wasn't able to say that right away. I actually let that go for like a month worth of games to make sure I knew what the hell I was talking about, because I'm not just going to make a rash decision and be like, oh, this is it. And then if I'm wrong, I lose all credibility. So I let it have a lot of time where I could really learn, but it was this. So these are the conversations where I could go to coach and say, hey, we're doing lifts right, we're recovering right, but Monday's too hard. Monday was too hard. And he goes, okay, what should I do? I said, just make Tuesday harder. I said, don't rest them Tuesday. I said, make sure Tuesday you kick their ass, kill them. Because if you don't, if Monday and Tuesday isn't Monday and Tuesday, we're sluggish on Saturday. So if practice right here didn't look like this, then I was going into the locker room, pulling guys into the weight room to do sleds in the weight room. So that's how I dealt with that was, hey, let's get some more conditioning. And it's a light sled. Again, I'm not blowing them out. It's something they got to recover from, but it's upping the workload. So that day had to be good. And this was our ideal Trimp and intensity. And this was all year 2. All right. So that's how that data calculating intensity throughout that year helped me answer, hey, why are we sluggish? Now we know. It gave us another answer, but that took us 2 years to find those 2 answers. Okay. So year 2, this is where I was coming into time on ice. And this is where that tactical lens comes into play. And what we're trying to do with this heart rate really affects change. So if you look at this on the left, that's the Trimp is in blue, your intensity on the ice is in red, and your time on ice, that's even 5-on-5. That's not special teams or anything. That's just an even 5-on-5 game. Okay, we lost to Clarkson in overtime. We beat St. Lawrence 5-2. This is like 5 years ago, so I think that's right. It's like 5-2. We beat Minnesota and we lose. Okay, what happened here? Well, I don't know. The Trimp was lower, but everything else looked pretty good. So that was kind of an anomaly. Maybe Minnesota was just better than us. Okay, but really what I'm getting at here, I'll cut to the chase, is AIC was ranked 60th or maybe 59th. There's like 59 teams in the country at that time. They were the worst team in the country. We barely beat them on Friday, and they kicked our ass on Saturday. We lost to the worst team in the country at home. And we're sitting there going, what the heck happened? Why? And the eye test, coaches are really smart. The guys didn't pass the eye test. Why are we so sluggish? Why do we look like crap? We had turnovers. Time on ice was crap. And this is how that intensity helped us. So Trimp is going to be what Trimp is. But why was intensity so low? It's because time on ice was incredibly high, because guys were not being responsible. And so that led us to go into year 2 saying, well, how long is too long? So then we had all this data saying 40 seconds. 40 seconds is our ceiling. If our guy is on the ice for 40 seconds, it's too long. So that's our number. So that we started calculating those, and you guys can see here how we started calculating that every single time of how many guys are in the red over here, this graph to the right. How many guys do we have in the red, and what are we winning or losing? Again, that's my most important KPI. Do we win games or lose games? This one we barely won. Look how many guys are in the red when we lose to the worst team in the country. boy, I'm still salty. So, you look at this and you're like, okay, we're not talking shit to you. Like, this is a big deal. This really does happen. If you're too long on the ice, your intensity plummets. You can't do what you're supposed to do. So we have those conversations. Now we're in the Big Ten tournament. This is the end of that year. And the Big Ten tournament at that time was one weekend. So we played Michigan on a Thursday, Minnesota on a Friday, and Wisconsin on Saturday. You look at that being Penn State and saying, man, this is a huge task. Well, we ended up winning that Big Ten tournament because we had conversations. We went in and had a team meeting about what it looks like when you get your butt kicked against AIC. So let's do what we can do. Let's manage our shifts. So really what that did was it educated them on how long they should be out there, what that felt like. And from a coaching standpoint, it was, hey, we always said take smart shifts, but it changed our language to, hey, let's go smart, short, intense shifts. Get out there, do your job, and get the hell off the ice so we can always have fresh legs, because Penn State hockey is we want to play fast pace. We're not sitting back being defensive. We're a highly offensive team. So that's the language. So in that Big Ten tournament, that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we had one guy in the red all weekend. We had 3 periods on Friday. Thursday, we beat Minnesota in double overtime and then beat Wisconsin in double overtime. So in 13 periods, we had one guy in the red, and it led to success, as opposed to AIC, where we had 13 guys in the red in 3 periods. So that's where that was really important, was when we start calculating this and we start utilizing this data, we can start affecting positive change. This is what it means when we tell you to manage your shift, because it relates to heart rate, it relates to recoveries, it relates to tactical success, and it relates to winning games. So for us, that's why we do the data. That's why we do the high performance model, because we can have tangible information to give to coaches, to give to athletes, to educate everyone in the high performance model. Not just our guys, not just our coaches, but everybody's involved. And that's why that's so important. And I'm really passionate about it, because it really helped us moving forward. So that was year 2. Year 3, this is me being in the booth going, okay, what the hell do I do now? Do I just watch a screen with red and yellow and green with our guys? Like, what do I do now? We kind of know this answer. What's the next answer? Well, it was kind of me saying, okay, let me prove this further. This is a weekend up in Wisconsin. You can see we had 11 guys in the red. And look at Saturday, period 2 and period 3. We were up going into period 3 and we got our butts kicked. Okay. And so I started calculating intensity per segment. So every media timeout, I calculate how do we play when it's our highest intensity? How do we play? What happens when it's the lowest intensity? And sure as shit, 8 of 11 goals against came during our lowest intensity of the period, when we were on our heels. Whether that was we're tired, our shift length is too long. Obviously, shift length was way too long, 45, 44, 43, 45, 45, 45, really bad. So obviously, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing in terms of shift length and tactical, taking care of the puck. That's what happens. We get scored on and we lose games. We actually lost that. Obviously, we lost that. One of their goals came during our highest intensity, right here in the first period. Was it? I don't remember what that was. Maybe it was a breakaway. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was just a super skilled guy hitting a corner. That happens. You can't prevent all of it. But 5 of 8 of our goals, 4 came during our highest intensity of the period. For me, that spoke volumes. It's like, hey, when we take care of what we're supposed to be doing right here with even average, it definitely shows in wins and losses. And so this weekend we got beat on that Saturday. Really poorly. They scored 4 goals in the last 10 minutes. And then we're stuck in the locker room after a loss for an hour and a half because a plane is stuck in Chicago because it snowed and can't get there. And so we're just sitting there sulking, and we don't get home till 3 a.m. And we felt like crap, which is the birth of that. That's when I changed Monday and Tuesday because we weren't recovering. So that's why Monday started being that lower day, so we could make sure we were recovered. So that's kind of how that related back. Okay, so that's what we were doing with heart rate data over the 3 years. It really gave us a lot of information and really affected some good change for us. And right now, looking at some Forceplate data, this is where we're going. We look at 4 different metrics. We try to get this 1 to 2 times a week at the very best. At once a week is okay, but we're looking at jump height. Jump height is kind of a poor predictor of being ready. It's too variable, but I like it because the guys can see that number. They can compete with themselves and each other. So that's why I like jump height. RSI mod is basically your fatigue. If that's going really far down, that's not a good sign. Going up's a good sign, very simply. And then the last two, the concentric peak force and eccentric deceleration for body weight, really tells us, are they explosive and are they strong? Because eccentric deceleration really tells me if they're gaining strength. Can they decelerate and then turn that around to start applying force? And that's where we're at with this right now. Like, we're just kind of in the data collection phase. But next year, my plan is to utilize this concentric peak and eccentric deceleration and start putting them into groups into what training they need. So it kind of makes it more individualized for the athletes. So if they're really good at the concentric, they're being explosive, hey, let's get them over here on the eccentric stuff. If they're good at the eccentrics, let's send them over there to the more power circuit style of things to make sure that everybody's getting the same training. Because let's face it, you got 20 guys are playing, you got 6 guys that are sitting out and are not getting a lot of playing time. So there's a lot of variability between your individuals, and just making sure as a strength coach that everybody's trained the way that they need to be trained. Nobody's falling off there. And then lastly, this is my last slide. So this is a few years ago, looking at jump height and flight time, contraction time. That's the orange line. That line is basically called RSI mod now, but you can see how that force plate shape changed for me. So week 1 and 2, I was getting baseline. Week 3 to week 6, I changed my training to make sure that those jumps looked better every single week, to make damn sure that we were recovering. So we were in a really good spot going into that weekend. My whole point of this is right here, this Princeton week. That right there was about where week 2 and week 1 was in terms of us being tired. We went over to Wells Fargo Arena and played Princeton and Philly. What was this week right here? We actually lost that game in overtime. This week was finals week. What happens during finals? You don't sleep. I tell you what, I've spent over $80,000 in this weight room and over 5 years to say that nutrition and sleep is everything. It really is. So when that nutritionist is coming over and talking, and your coaches are hammering nutrition and sleep, and the athletes are sitting there going, oh, okay, I've heard this one before. I'm telling you, that's what it looks like. If your nutrition's on point and you're sleeping, you're pretty good. Doesn't matter what the hell your training looks like right here if you're not sleeping. So sleep. It is huge. So with that slide being the last thing, again, that's what it is. It was a lot of data, but in closing with that, if anybody is looking at doing it, I'd say take your time. Don't try to do everything at once. Like, just take a piece, get really good at it. And once you know what that piece can give you, grab another piece, learn that really well. Like, I think we get in trouble when we're saying, again, I'm guilty of this. So when I first was approached to do this high performance and do some data, I was like, that's going to be too much. I learned my lesson. So just a piece at a time, and just do it in a way that you can really learn what it's doing for you. What does the anomaly look like? What's it look like when they need intervention? And just really get good at it. And once you're good at that, then move on and add another piece. So I'm still adding pieces. Like I said, next year is going to be individualized training in terms of force plate testing. So that's what we're doing. And that's how we kind of utilize that sports science and high performance. So I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share that. And I guess that is it. And I don't know how to stop sharing. Can I do that, or can you do that? There it is. Stop share. All right. I guess that's it.
Well, what we typically do at this point, we're at about the 30-minute mark. If people want to hop off, you certainly can. If not, we'll go to some questions. But certainly thank Cam for the time you put into this, man. This was really, really good. Just big takeaways, just talking about the high performance model, principle based, sound practices, implementing slow, being top down, using your information across different departments, understanding the impact of how everything fits together. Those are huge ticket items for us. like to also thank everybody else that has been here. We have people from academics, we have people from administration, we have sport coaches, we have support staffs, we have everybody. So we want to continue to grow this, and everyone from the affiliate campuses that hopped on, thank you as well. I do want to say our last thing before we move to question and answers is next performance school will be March 10th. We have a Penn State alum and physical therapist from California. He operates a website called the Prehab Guys, and you can find that on Instagram, Twitter. Really sound, easy to use practices for body maintenance, and we can all use that, even us as professionals. But he's going to be speaking in this time. But at this point, if anybody needs to hop off, please feel the ability to do so. If not, we'll stick around here and ask Cam some questions. Thank you, everybody.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. I have a question. Great presentation, Coach Davidson. I'm in academics, clinical education coordinating as a training. I assign as a training students in the clinical side. Your first year, that 3 shift, that high intensity and the anaerobic and those kind of things. And you see that the 3 periods, I'm sorry, that I think third period seems to be high intensity portion is much less compared to first and second. Perhaps maybe that the team need to be a little bit more like high intensity, need to have a little bit like shifting per se that can save for the third period maybe to actually do, or I don't know, but just like it's interesting to see trend that they are pumped up for the first and second, and then the third period kind of like flat kind of things to see that kind of like a line that high intensity portion. So I'm just curious that information, that how they perform, but also that when they see that the game, maybe some changes maybe. That's one question. AIC, the game, I guess the team lost. We don't schedule the games, but maybe AIC game, maybe switch from St. Lawrence so that the crappy team can play earlier than so they can save it for the in case I'm going to against Michigan, Wisconsin, whatever the Big Ten. But I'm just curious that these information, that how I'm just fascinated. I'm sorry I talk a lot, but this is awesome to see the tendency that how they do. That was the second question. Maybe scheduled at the game. Third one, the 11 guys were more than the 40 seconds or more, and you can see that like that each shift that they spending. Do you use that the data during the intersession? Maybe looking at this. Maybe 5 guys need to be a little bit less skate, maybe second, the period or third period, whatever, to actually adjust to that, so that can, coach the game, but I'm just curious that is like, it's a huge factor. If the players are on the ice so that long, it affects later on for the fatigue in the third period. So, right, so I feel like, I hate to lose, but I just see like how the shifting, and the coach can listen so they can maybe score a couple, the goals in the third period to win or whatever. But just, man, this is awesome. But just, I'm sorry, I'm kind of ignorant, but just 3 questions that I saw that from presentation. That's awesome. But just your viewpoint of that, my ignorant questions.
Sure. Damned if I know. let me clarify. So in terms of schedule, that's above my pay grade, my friend. that happens long before we can do anything about that. So if we're playing AIC in the middle, that's what happens. We got to deal with that. In terms of looking flat going to the third period in Wisconsin when we lost, that is an answer that or a question I think everybody looks at that like sometimes we come out in Pagula in the first period and we start fast and we're flying and we score within the first minute, and sometimes we're so flat we only get like 5 shots in the first 10 minutes. Why does that happen? I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. Why do we look pretty good first period, second period in Wisconsin, and third period come out? Is it because we were leading 5-2 in the second period, and then Wisconsin scores two goals, makes it 5-4 going to third period. Then they proceed to score 4 more goals in the last 10 minutes, so we lose. What is that? Is it, hey, we're playing AIC? Worst team in the country. We're Penn State. Do we have an overlooking tendency? I'd like to say that, oh, we never do that. We're really good. We never overlook anybody. We may have, it was a nice lesson for us. We got kicked in the ass, and it was a nice lesson. But those are really good questions, and things that if we had the answers, I don't know if I'd ever have that kind of data. Really good questions. I wish I could give you an answer. I don't know.
But it's so fascinating. It's just tendency to just look at things. So I really appreciate these data.
Hey, Josh, this is Dennis. You mind if I ask a question?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hi, Cam. So just for background, Dennis Scanlon, and I'm the faculty athletics rep. I'm a faculty member. I do research with all kinds of data. So I'm fascinated kind of from that perspective, just in data-informed decision-making. My focus is in the healthcare industry more generally. So it resonates with me. But my question is along the lines of some of what I'm tasked with and charged with in terms of athletics. And that is, and I think it relates to some of the points that you made around all the other things outside of the sport that impact our student athletes. Exams, you mentioned the final exam period, sort of the stress of being a student and everything else that goes along with it. So I guess I wanted to ask a couple. One, I had an idea, and two, I wanted to ask a question. The idea was, I think it would be fascinating if we were to combine with the data information on sort of students' academic kind of responsibilities, right? Because that peaks and flows as well. And you mentioned the final exam period, but that varies from student to student, whether they're freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It varies on major and so forth and so on. So I'm not suggesting that you take that on, but boy, we if you ever run out of things to do, there may be a possibility to sort of integrate with we could talk about that. Certainly, I think it would be fascinating, and kind of customize sort of get a more customized sort of estimate based on kind of specific academic program. But my question generally is this, and it has kind of come up in the context of I won't even mention the sport, but we have a lot of debate at the conference level among the FARs around our departure policies for championships, for example, and length of championships. And there's some sports that want to depart their campus 48 hours in advance. And what happens is we get all these waivers. And the excuse that's always given for those who want an early departure.
That's what I'm for. I don't think going the day before is a good idea ever in terms of championships. Volleyball, we went a couple days early up to Seattle, and it was great. It gave us time to acclimate to that time change, because that national championship game was like 7 or 8 p.m., which is, midnight, Eastern time. So that was really smart in their decision. And I was on that trip. And like I said, that's why I like to travel as a strength coach, because you get a feel for all that. So that's how I would answer that piece. In terms of the workload, so my wife works in the Morgan Center, and that's really brought a lot of new information to light for me, because as a strength coach, I'm like, let's have these kind of, I'm guilty of it, weight room practice, and then go do whatever you have to do. I'll see you in the morning for lift. I'm not saying go home and make sure you study and get in bed by 9 p.m. I kind of don't hit that too much, but you're absolutely right. I mean, everything that we're trying to do is health and wellness, but at the same time, we make travel a day earlier. And on top of academics and all this, athletes have a ton of other, I want to be very nice, they have a ton of other stuff that they have to go do on top of all these meetings and practice and how much time they have to spend in a training room and so on and so forth. So my opinion, in my humble yet completely accurate opinion, is the athletes have too much on their plate.
Yep.
I think we force them to do too much. Because back when, I wrestled at Wyoming back in 2001, and that was a long time ago, we didn't have all that stuff at all. We just, we didn't have all that extracurricular things that the kids have now. So I hope that helps. That's not a great answer, but that's
No, it is. And I'd be interested, in discussing with many of you, it's sometime appropriate, kind of a broader approach, because it doesn't surprise me if you can leave earlier and avoid potential weather issues and just get there. Absolutely. I get it. What we're balancing though, or missed classes and exams and all that kind of stuff. And that really is the challenge. What really concerns me though, which is why I asked the question, is for certain, for sports like swimming or these all-comer tournaments, what happens is through this waiver process, some institutions get there 2 days earlier and others don't. And I'm worried that creates a competitive imbalance, right? So our swimmers got there at 9 o'clock on Monday, and I won't mention the other schools, but I know some schools got there on Sunday. And what I'm trying to figure out is, if that's a competitive imbalance, we need to deal with that at a conference level. And if the expertise of those of you who are in this field suggest that 48 hours prior to the start of a competition makes sense, then we ought to just legislate that and not deal with this artificial waiver process, which is what I deal with, where people make up all kinds of reasons, why they need to leave. So anyhow, I may follow up with some of you, or maybe ask Nelly if we could, even organize a session at some point to talk about this, because
Absolutely. And Dennis,
I'm sorry, Josh.
no, if I could just kind of maybe spark that additional conversation we may have. I think some of the principles that we've talked about in the past is understanding how unique our setting is here in State College as it pertains to travel compared to some other universities. And then the principles with maybe it's not 48 hours, but what we would try to like to do is to avoid rushing, and then at the same time avoid stacking multiple stressors on top of one another. So I think that could help guide that hour limit, whether it's 48, whatever it may be. And then I guess the other thing I'd like to bring to light potentially for that conversation would be, there's sports that are played indoors, there's sports that are played outdoors, and they're really in inclement weather potentially. So what is the impact there? We have a couple people from softball here. Our baseball team interacts with the same types of potential problems. Golf as well, where travel one is somewhat complicated because of the size of the roster, getting out, the uniqueness of the team, but also the weather delays that may exist within that sport would then further complicate travel on the backside. So I think that's a great conversation that we can have a lot of good input on.
Yeah, I think it's a huge difference. When I was at College of Charleston, having to do a 12-hour bus ride to Samford to play basketball, and as opposed to sitting on a plane next to Andy Bance and eating Five Guys in an airport, with the eating competition, it's those stressors are different.
I
do have a question. I'm sorry, it's not about the travel policies and all that, although I have lots of thoughts on it. But my question has to do with when you're planning out your weeks, and I know yours was more so related towards to hockey as far as intensity. And like you mentioned, your hour-long practices. Obviously, I'm with softball, and we're not an intense sport. There are bursts, moments of intensity, I guess, but the length of our practices, our athletes will be active 4 hours a day. It's an hour-long lift and then 3 hour-long practices. So could you equate, like, when you say these high days and these low days, like, obviously we're trying to prep and have our athletes perform on the weekends. And those days, double headers, we're playing double headers. That's like a 12-hour day. So I don't know if like intensity equates to just like longevity of practices too. Like during the week, should we make it a point like this is only a 2-hour day, or things like, although I guess they're never really intense or whatever. But I feel like it's still, it's an exhausting day because of the amount of time
Yeah,
that they have to be active
really
and
good,
focused and
really
locked
good
in.
point. Yeah, really good point. I kind of run into that with volleyball. Although I'm not as involved in those decisions with volleyball. You know, they practice 3 hours a day, always. And, you know, it's one of those things where from what I've gathered from hockey, how can it relate to something like softball? My answer to that, my first thought is, more than 48 hours out is your hardest day of the week. So that day, 72 hours, 3 days before competition should be your hardest day of the week. That's what I think, like, without even looking at it. I think if your hardest day is 2 days before your competition, I think that might put you in a hole. I think if it's the day before, obviously that wouldn't be smart, but going 3 days out, that's your toughest day of the week. What I've seen helps really well for us. That's what makes us have the best success. Does that relate well with how many games you guys play in a week when you get going? That right there is, I have not worked softball since like 2010. So it's been a long time, and it's just, that's one of those things where I'd have to really be in it every single day with practice and see how things go. And I wish I could give you a better answer than that. But for me, it's 72 hours out is usually what your hardest day should be. Nelly, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think just kind of not following like a reductionist approach, but reducing down what the demands of the game are and what kind of game it is. So you mentioned a second ago, Stephanie, that the demands of softball are different than hockey or field sports. And it's true. It's more skill oriented. You know, there's time that needs to be associated with developing that skill. But at the same time, thinking about from a principle-based perspective of volume is the killer of upper end neuromuscular recruitment. So if I volume our athletes to death, or whatever sport it may be, our ability to tap into upper end, you know, force production very rapidly may be reduced. It doesn't mean it can't happen. It just may be reduced. So there is maybe some evidence of doing somewhat of an undulating approach across your week. Now, the uniqueness of baseball softball is you guys play 4 to 5 times a week. So finding that weekly periodization backwards is somewhat challenging. So I think just being creative and keeping an eye on athletes can may be the best answer. But understanding that you still have to get your work, it just needs to be quality work potentially.
And I have to follow up on it. So, you know, this year's actually, with COVID and scheduling and everything else, it's fairly easy because we know we're going to have Mondays off. We know Tuesday will be the toughest day. And we can build towards the Friday single game before Saturday doubleheader and then another game on Sunday. But in general, normal schedule time, there's going to be a Wednesday game. With our Friday game, generally it can be in at 5, 6 o'clock at night. You know, with the intensity of game is going to be slightly higher. So we're looking at, you know, about 48 to 60 hours out. That's going to be the hardest piece of that week, non-conference game before a conference series. So Tuesday would still be, even though Monday's off, well, Monday would be on if we're at home, Tuesday would be off if we're on the road. So having those days be light to build for that Wednesday, you know, single non-conference game, is that the best way to attack that, knowing that we can't quite do 72 hours, but there's still a way with non-conference, you know, we're still going to get at bats to people that don't normally get them during the conference weekend. So there is some slight piece of minimizing the intensity of the starters and or, you know, your ace and things like that.
I mean, anybody, please feel free to jump in, but I would think not be concerned as much decreasing the intensity, but the volume. You know, quality of work and intensity of work can still stay high. If I'm a strength coach in the weight room in season, I can still keep that weight high. I can keep the velocity very high. I just reduce the volume. And then it may just be like your starters that have a lot of at bats. Time on feet is something I often track with baseball, was if they have a lot of time on their feet with their spikes, they're standing in the dugout, standing on the field for a long time, maybe changing something up, getting them maybe just an extra little period of time off. I've been over at you guys' spot. You guys are extremely creative with what you're doing. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue for you guys. But I think there's ways throughout your week, if you can just gradually up and down, it can help.
Now, I have to say, because of this, we already have plastic molded cleats coming for next year, and they'll spend less time in their metal spikes than ever. And they'll have more time for their legs to be fatigued by things that we've learned and from this performance panel all the time. So those things are being incorporated. So thank you.
Just to add one more thing, when I was telling you 72 hours needs to be the hardest day, I'm talking about volume. Just so, yeah, I wasn't talking about intensity. So that, the duration of that.
That's another performance school. But one thing is that happens very easily, where in our world of performance, we have our own language. We have, Cam was talking about one thing and we all are on the same page, but it was maybe one word. So thinking about even just within our performance units as a team of standardizing the language you use can help in the long term too. So I think that's another performance school that we could dive into. So it's 1 o'clock. We certainly can keep this hot and going for as long as we would like, but definitely want to respect everybody's time. If anybody has any questions, Cam, they can reach out to you via email. Cam is really active on social media as well, so I'd encourage you guys to follow him there. But if anybody has any follow-up questions or need anything, please let me know. I'll send the recording out after this is final, but I appreciate everybody for making this happen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cam.
Thank you.
Hey, man, that was good. You got your mute on.
Yeah, I kind of got rolling. I forgot what I said. I just rolled, man.
No, that was really good, man.
Yeah. So no, I really appreciate it, man. That was fun. Seriously, I drank way too much coffee. I'm like sitting here like this. No, thank you, man. I appreciate it, man.
No, that was really good. The points you hit on, I mean, like what I mentioned in the follow-up, like that's what we're trying to do. Like, is just bring important things to light, give some examples. I mean, I really appreciate you doing this. This was big. Sure,
man. I really liked that the professor's question about, you came flat in the third period. What if you did this? I was like, it's been 15 years. We're still trying to figure that out, man.
Yeah.
That was funny. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. No,
but that was, he's cool. He seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, for sure.
So I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt, man. What I'll do, I took some screenshots. I won't put out any of your charts or anything. But I just took a couple screenshots of a couple of slides I'll put out and just, market it and make it really good.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right, man. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate it. Yep. See you, buddy.
Bye.